The first thing my husband said when he saw me standing in the doorway was, "You have no proof." He said it calmly, almost gently, as if he were trying to save me from embarrassing myself. Around the dining table, his mother, his older brother, his sister, and my husband all stared at me while I held my phone in both hands. Nobody asked what I had heard. Nobody asked why I was shaking. They had already decided I was the problem. My husband had spent 3 weeks telling his family that I was imagining things, that I was stressed, that I had misunderstood a conversation I was never supposed to hear. And now, during what he called a family meeting, he wanted everyone to agree that I was unstable enough to believe my own fears. I almost walked away. Then I remembered the recording. 3 weeks earlier, I had gone downstairs late at night to get a glass of water. I heard voices coming from the home office. My husband and his brother were inside, speaking quietly. I stopped when I heard my name. I wasn't trying to spy. I simply froze. His brother said, "Once she signs those papers, it's done." My husband answered, "She'll sign them. She trusts me." I stood in the dark hallway, barely breathing. They were discussing the refinancing papers my husband had placed in front of me that week. He had told me they were routine documents connected to our mortgage. But that night, I heard enough to know they weren't. His brother asked what would happen if I refused. My husband laughed softly and said, "Then I'll make her think she has no choice." I quietly returned upstairs. My hands were trembling so badly that I nearly dropped my phone. I didn't confront him that night. Instead, I turned on the voice recorder I had recently installed for work interviews and left my phone on the kitchen counter the next morning while I asked him about the papers. He lied again. That was when I understood this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a plan. And now, weeks later, my husband was sitting across from me, telling his family I had no proof. I looked at him and asked, "Are you sure about that?" His smile disappeared. My husband's smile disappeared for only a second, but I noticed it. Then his mother leaned forward and said, "Enough with the drama. If you have something to say, say it." I looked around the table. His brother, Daniel, had his arms crossed tightly against his chest. His sister, Melissa, kept checking her phone. Nobody looked nervous except my husband. That gave me more courage than anything else could have. I placed my phone on the table but didn't press play. "Before I show you anything," I said, "I want to ask one question. Why did you tell me the refinancing papers were only about lowering our monthly payment?" My husband sighed. "Because that's what they were." "Then why did Daniel say I needed to sign them before the house could be transferred?" Daniel immediately shook his head. "I never said that." My husband looked at him, and that tiny glance told me everything. They had practiced this. They had expected me to accuse them, and they had agreed on the same answer. His mother slapped her palm against the table. "This is ridiculous. You're accusing your husband and his brother of stealing your house?" "I'm not accusing anyone," I said quietly. "I'm asking questions." My husband leaned back. "You see? This is exactly what I've been talking about. She's become obsessed with this house." I felt something inside me crack. For 12 years, I had helped pay that mortgage. I had painted the nursery when we thought we'd have children. I had planted the rose bushes my mother gave me before she died. That house wasn't just an asset to me. It was the only place that still felt like mine. Then my husband reached across the table and said, "Give me the phone." I pulled it back. "No." His voice hardened. "You can't secretly record private conversations and use them against people." "Then why are you afraid to hear it?" Nobody answered. I unlocked my phone. My thumb hovered over the recording. But before I pressed play, Daniel suddenly stood up. "This meeting is over." I looked at him. "Why?" He didn't answer. He grabbed his jacket and walked toward the door. My husband followed him with his eyes. That was when I realized something even more important than the recording. They weren't afraid of what I had heard. They were afraid of what I might hear next. I stopped Daniel before he reached the hallway. "You know what's on this recording, don't you?" He froze. My husband whispered, "Don't do this." I turned back toward him. "You said I had no proof. So let's find out exactly how much proof I have." Then I pressed play. The room went completely silent. The recording began with the sound of a chair scraping across the floor, followed by Daniel's voice. "Once she signs, the bank won't ask questions." My mother-in-law's face changed immediately. She looked at my husband. He stared at the phone as if he could somehow make the sound disappear. Then his own voice came through the speaker. "She doesn't need to know everything. She'll sign if I tell her it's necessary." Nobody moved. I watched my husband's confidence drain away word by word. Daniel tried to interrupt the recording, but I raised my hand. "Let it finish." His voice continued. "What if she talks to an attorney?" Daniel asked. My husband answered, "She won't. She trusts me." Then came the sentence that made my mother-in-law cover her mouth. "Once the loan is approved, we move the house into the new company. She'll think it's just a refinancing change." My sister-in-law lowered her phone. "What company?" she whispered. Daniel finally spoke. "Turn it off." I looked at him. "Why?" "Because you don't understand what you're hearing." "Then explain it." He couldn't. The recording continued. My husband said, "The house has enough equity. We can use it to cover the business debt, and when the company is stable, nobody loses anything." Daniel replied, "Except her." My husband laughed. "She'll still have a place to live." That sentence hurt more than I expected. Not because I hadn't suspected the truth, but because hearing my husband say it made everything real. He had never been planning our future. He had been planning around me. I stopped the recording. My husband immediately said, "You don't understand the context." I almost laughed. "Then give me the context." He had nothing. His mother looked furious now, but not at me. She turned toward her sons. "You were going to put this house into that company?" Daniel said, "Mom, it wasn't supposed to happen like this." That was the moment everything shifted. They had spent the entire evening making me defend myself, but suddenly they were defending themselves. My sister-in-law stood up and asked, "How much debt does the company have?" Daniel wouldn't answer. I reached into my bag and placed another document on the table. "I found this in the office last week." It was a copy of the company's financial statement. The debt was far larger than I had imagined. My husband stared at the pages. "Where did you get that?" "From the same folder you told me didn't exist." His face went pale. His mother picked up the document and started reading. Then she looked at her sons and said quietly, "Tell me you didn't do this." Neither man answered. And in that silence, I finally understood why my husband had been so desperate to convince everyone that I had no proof. For several seconds, nobody spoke. My mother-in-law was still holding the financial statement, staring at the numbers as though they might change if she read them again. Finally, she looked at my husband and asked, "How much of this debt were you planning to put against the house?" He lowered his eyes. That was answer enough. I felt strangely calm. I had spent weeks imagining this moment, thinking I would scream or cry or demand an explanation. Instead, I simply felt tired. My husband reached for my hand. I moved mine away. "Please," he said. "We can fix this." I shook my head. "You had weeks to fix it before I knew." He insisted that he never intended to hurt me, that the business was struggling temporarily, and that once things improved, he would have protected our home. But those words no longer meant anything. Intentions didn't erase documents. Love didn't erase signatures. And marriage didn't mean handing someone the right to gamble with everything you had built together. I told his family that I had already spoken with an attorney before coming to the meeting. My husband looked stunned. You planned all this? No, I said. I protected myself. I had placed a legal hold on any attempt to transfer or refinance the property without my consent. The papers he wanted me to sign were now useless. His brother's company would have to deal with its own debt. My mother-in-law started crying. She apologized to me, saying she had believed her sons when they told her I was selfish and suspicious. I didn't blame her for everything, but I told her the truth. You believed them because it was easier than believing me. She nodded through her tears. My husband asked if there was still a chance for our marriage. I looked at the man I had trusted for 12 years and realized I wasn't looking at the same person anymore. I don't know, I said. But I know this isn't the marriage I thought I had. A month later, I filed for separation. I didn't take revenge. I didn't expose him publicly. I didn't destroy his business or call everyone we knew. I simply refused to carry consequences for choices I hadn't made. The house stayed in my name, protected from the debt he had tried to attach to it. Daniel eventually sold his company to settle what he could, and my husband moved into an apartment across town. The last time we spoke, he asked why I had recorded that conversation. I told him the truth. Because somewhere inside me, I knew your words and your actions weren't matching anymore. He looked down. I walked away without another argument. Months later, I planted new roses in the backyard. For the first time in a long time, I stood there without feeling afraid of what might happen next. I had lost a marriage, but I hadn't lost myself. And sometimes the quietest kind of justice is simply refusing to let someone else's betrayal decide the rest of your life.